Now, there's been mixed reactions to the Phase 1 trade deal signed by China and the United States. Although there was much fanfare at the White House ceremony, the verdict from the region's stock markets was less enthusiastic. And it wasn't too long before there were signs that Washington and Beijing weren't in full accord. Chinese Vice-Premier Liu He has rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's suggestion that Phase 2 talks begin immediately. He's described the idea as unwise. Mr. Liu says both sides might wind up with nothing if they rush to a second job before the first one is properly done. Washington says the deal is a great win for American companies and farmers, while the Chinese say any concessions they've made are in line with its interests. Either way, the road ahead is expected to be bumpy and unpredictable. Olivia Xiong reports.
Chinese Vice-Premier Liu He is now a frequent visitor to Washington. This week, Mr. Liu made his 8th trip to the U.S. capital since the trade war between the two countries broke out nearly 2 years ago. After 13 rounds of trade negotiations in Beijing and Washington, the trusted economic czar of Chinese President Xi Jinping was at the White House to sign the so-called Phase 1 trade deal with the U.S. Flanked by Chinese officials, including Central Bank Governor Yi Gang and Commerce Minister Zhong Shan, Mr. Liu read out a letter from Mr. Xi before addressing his U.S. hosts.
过去2年，双方在经贸领域遇到了一些困难，我们的磋商还几度遭遇挫折，因为我们对很多问题的看法并不一致。但是双方经贸团队并没有放弃。经过双方不懈的努力，在平等和相互尊重的基础上，我们达成了第1阶段的协议。
Unlike his guest's largely scripted performance, U.S. President Donald Trump was exuberant, calling the deal the biggest anybody's ever seen. Under the agreement, China said it will buy an extra $200 billion in American products over the next 2 years.
I just want to say this is a great day for both China and the United States. This is an agreement that people have been talking about for 40 years and never were able to get even a piece of paper signed. We never had an agreement. And this is going to be a great agreement for both countries. It's far greater than $200 billion, and it'll grow every year. It also unifies the countries.
Mr. Trump has good reason to be ecstatic. The deal is seen as a major concession from China.
It comes as a big surprise to us because we were expecting something in the range of $50 to $75 billion a purchase. This $200 billion mostly come from actually the manufacturing sector, and then we're also surprised to see the services sector purchase because services was not part of the trade deficit reduction deal. I genuinely don't think China has the capacity to meet it to 100%. The main reason is that the economy is slowing down. So the supply and demand, there is a big gap there. With additional purchase from the U.S., that means more severe competition for domestic producers, and the cost of production will also go up.
Most analysts also agreed that, if anything, the highly anticipated Phase 1 deal only confirmed views that the two sides remain far apart on all major structural issues. While China has committed towards improving its intellectual property practices and protections, the deal did not spell out concrete measures that would ensure the enforcement of these commitments. It also didn't lay out any measures regarding China's massive subsidies for its industry. Chinese state media said the concessions that the country made in the Phase 1 deal are in line with its own development needs. The Trump administration has been keen to talk up the Phase 1 deal, with U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin calling it a great win for U.S. companies and farmers. The Chinese side, on the other hand, has maintained a low profile, keeping mum most of the time on details of a deal which some observers have described as a partial truce in this 18-month-long trade dispute.
smart.
It's not surprising that China is treading this cautiously. Hawkish positions on China tend to win wide bipartisan support in Washington, particularly during an election year. Trump has already begun touting the trade deal as a centerpiece of his 2020 re-election campaign, crediting himself for being the only president who is brave enough to stand up to China, while previous administrations sat by and allowed China to walk all over the U.S. For Vice-Premier Liu He, the toughest part of his job may have just started the moment the ink on this Phase 1 agreement dried. Olivia Xiong, CNA, Beijing.